This summer, I managed to bring my 5k time down from 16:21 to 16:05. This is a 16-second improvement I've made in 2024, and although that doesn't sound a huge amount, it's been nice to see an improvement in a distance I don't normally favour and didn't specifically target. However, the training I did seemed to have a bigger impact over the 5k distance than the 10k distance. So today I want to dive into that, explain why I think that was the case, and tell you what I'm going to be doing more of after this marathon block to bring that time down even more. Now, the summer speed block was only 10 weeks long, and I've just wrapped up my final 5k of the season, which has leaked in to the marathon training block. But over those 10 weeks I put in some really good training and saw some great improvements. So I'm going to share the structure, 3 things that I feel really helped, and then talk at the end about what I want to do to extend all of that and really push that time down even more going into next year. So let's dive into the weekly structure of the training. Now, I was specifically targeting the 10k distance and really going for a PB over there, but to be honest with you, I just didn't get anywhere near it. However, the couple of 5Ks that I threw in there as tune-up races actually went surprisingly well, and I have my reasons as to why that happened, and we'll explain that shortly. Let's get into the structure. It was very much a case of starting the week easy with an easy run on Monday. Then I did a double threshold on Tuesday. We'll dive into more of that shortly. I rested Wednesday. I did another easy run on Thursday, and then I did a very specific and targeted speed session on the Friday. I wrapped up the week with a steady, moderate zone 2 long run, and then rested on the Sunday. Now, summer for me has never been a strong point for getting PBs, and to be honest with you, I never ever really target the 5Ks. Throwing 2 of them into one training block is completely unheard of, and I've never ever done that in the nearly 10 years of running that I've been going. Now, I felt that from this structure of training I gained more strength than speed. Despite hitting some of the fastest paces I ever have hit in training, I've got to say, overall, I just felt really strong throughout that 10 weeks. No sort of signs of injury, no worries, no niggles appearing. I just felt really good, really strong. And I think the double threshold workouts have a lot to do with that. If I think about it logically, I'm doing in those days pretty much 20k worth of threshold work, and then the speed session is on the side. What I found when I did the double threshold work back 2 years ago, originally leading up to London Marathon, was that I felt super strong. I felt really, really strong in my running, but I didn't feel sharp. I completely lost that top end, and I felt like you could wind me up and let me go at a specific pace that I was training in and around that double threshold training, and I'd be fine for ages. But anything in and around there, I was just absolutely abysmal. So I wanted to correct that this time, and very much a case of throwing in that really fast top end speed work, which again is going to be one of the points that we come on to shortly. And I think that ended up being the perfect blend for me personally. Now, just before we get into the 3 things that I think really helped during this block, I will throw out a bit of a disclaimer. Of course, there are multiple ways that you can train. This is just the way that I decided to train. A more traditional approach, I suppose, would have been perhaps a speed workout on a Tuesday and a Friday, or some people like to go Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday and throw in 3 workouts, some being threshold repeats, some being really fast interval speed work, and then of course some tempo maybe in the long run on the weekend, just to get a blend of speed work in there. And of course, those Tuesday and Friday structures that I mentioned earlier again can be blended with tempo, threshold and top end interval workouts. However, I think the way that I approached it, as I said, was slightly more on the strength side of things. I always find myself to be a good strength runner. I just tend to lack that cutting edge speed, and I feel that comes from just quite having a big aerobic engine, but really not having too much of that top end speed. And so that leads me on nicely to talking about point 1, which I think really helped during this training block, and that was really focusing on speed workouts that contained intervals faster than race pace. For me, in previous times, I have very much done 10k training blocks, and I've labeled those as speed blocks, and so therefore I've only ever really gone faster than 10k pace, which ends up being in and around 5k effort. For me this time, I very much focused on putting some like mile efforts in there, 1500 meter type of paces that are way faster than my goal 5k pace or even my current 5k pace. As an example, so out of the 5ks that I've been running, I'm running in and around 5:13 to 5:15 per mile average, which is a low 16-minute 5k or 5:12 per mile. Some of my paces and some of my repeats that I was doing, maybe 1 and 2 minute intervals, are very much sub 5-minute mile pace. So I'd love to think, not that I have, but I'd love to think that I could go and run a sub 5-minute mile on the track, maybe around 4:50 to 4:55. And so therefore I was basically trying to run some repeats at that pace and some of them slightly quicker. And so for reference, those double threshold days were very much a case of running close to marathon effort, around 5:55 to 6:05 per mile pace in the morning. And that was 10k worth of volume for that. And then 10k in the evening, much more closer, around 10k effort, so around the 5:20s to 5:30s per mile. So when it came to the speed work, I knew it was going to be crucial to put in some faster than race pace stuff, and then of course as we got closer to the time, lock in to 5k race pace. And that leads me nicely on to the next point. So after week 6, or I think it was in week 6, I locked in to practice race pace intervals. Now this is pretty standard stuff. I do this in a lot of my training, and towards the end of a training block, I very much a case of practicing race pace. Like in marathon efforts now, for my marathon training 8 weeks out, I'm locking into marathon mode and specifically training at marathon pace. Same with the half marathon, same with the 10k. Towards the end, when you've done some work in and around that 10k effort, I like to lock in and start to practice and see how it feels. So what happened was the double thresholds continued right the way through. So I was still getting that good strength work in and that good volume on the Tuesday. But the Fridays became much more 5k race pace focused. So as an example, week 6 comes around, and rather than doing intervals that were always going to be faster than race pace, I did 2 by k, which then were at my goal race pace, which was sub 16-minute 5k pace. And then I did some faster intervals after that. So I broke the workout into 2, progressed through to sort of like week 8 and 9, and then I locked into 3 by a k and practiced 3k's worth of work at race pace with some faster intervals. Now beyond there, I had more 5k's entered, so past that speed block of dedicated 10 weeks, I then started trying to practice 5 by a k, kind of came up a little bit short. I got the workouts done on one occasion, not on the other, didn't quite hit the goal paces that I did on all of them, which kind of showed me and reflected in the results that I've just run. However, it was great to be able to lock in and know and then get consistent with my results, that 5k pace I was running in training very much translated to my 5k race result. As an example, my last 5 by a k session ended up averaging out at 16:11 as an overall 5k time, all the 5k reps added up. And my 5k races this year have gone from 16:19 down to 16:08, 16:05, and then 16:09. So very, very close practicing in training to what I got in racing. And the third thing was having a bit of a mindset shift in terms of the focus of that training. I knew, and I kind of feel like it's more apparent in shorter distance, that those sessions are very much the priority. As an example, in marathon training, I tend to prioritize all of my runs, and so mainly focus more on volume rather than specific sessions themselves. Yes, I want to be in good fresh shape for the sessions, but often in marathon training we can go into workouts and long runs quite fatigued because the week has been quite big. With the speed workouts I was doing, I did 2 things in that training block which completely changed and made me execute good workouts 9 out of 10 occasions, to be honest with you. And that was dropped my zone 2 runs and just left it in on a weekend. So normally what I might do is a steady run on a Monday and then a workout on a Tuesday, or double threshold or a workout. That changed completely and went from easy to double threshold and then easy to session. So there was no steady stuff midweek at all, so that I was nice and fresh for those sessions. And number 2, I cut the long run right down. I just didn't need, and you don't really need, to be running the length that you do during marathon training. I know a lot of people really enjoy running long. I am very guilty of that and I really enjoy it. And in previous training blocks, I think over the years, I've probably jeopardized a lot of my training blocks and not got the most out of myself because I've still been quite selfish and wanted to do longer runs, even though they're not necessarily as beneficial to the shorter 5k distance stuff as I once thought that they were. And I have kind of known that I needed to cut it back, but I've just been avoiding it. Well, this time I did. I kept them to sort of like 17 minutes and progressed towards the end of the 10 weeks up to 90 minutes, and I just never went past there. I did keep them steady, and it was good fun to have shorter long runs. I did actually enjoy it for those 10 weeks. And once again, that was another factor that meant that I didn't fatigue myself too much going into the next week. So I guess that then leads us on to what's next. What would I do next, and what am I going to do next for the next 5k training block? Well, I can confirm that I'm definitely going to spend a dedicated amount of time training for 5ks, not just 10ks, but 5ks. I have really I can't begin to explain how much I enjoyed this summer. 10 weeks, those were some of the best 10 weeks that I have ever had in training. So fun, so enjoyable, completely different stimulus, running those top end workouts, a different thrill, a different chase. It just lit something in me, and that was great to feel. And of course, now I switched back into marathon mode, that's kind of died down a little bit, and I want to get back to it after this marathon training block. So I'm going to create one big macro cycle of training and then break that down into micro cycles. Now that can involve a multitude of different ways of doing it, but I think what I'm going to focus on first in the first micro cycle is hill work. I want to keep double threshold work going. I feel like as a strength-based runner, that's kind of my forte, and I also really enjoy it. That was part of the reason why I enjoyed the summer training so much. I love doing the double thresholds, and I felt like the speed work complemented it really nicely. Of course, I know that true double threshold training is done on a Tuesday and a Thursday and then a speed workout on the weekend. I understand that. I can't commit that level of time at the moment, so that's just not an option. But double threshold and hills might be the first one, just to get some really good strength going for maybe a good 6 to 8 weeks, and then from there look at double threshold work and then putting in some raw speed, you know, some, as I said, faster than race pace stuff, and then double threshold as the final micro cycle, double threshold, and then race pace specific stuff. What does this ultimately mean? I know that 10 weeks is not enough time to get yourself into decent shape. You need a long period of time. Of course, an alternative is going to be to use fartlek workouts instead of double threshold training, because of course they give you bang for your buck. You're running on undulating terrain, you're going to get strength in abundance, and you're not working to pace, you're working to effort. So they are a staple for a lot of people during shorter distance training. But then of course you mix and match that with more race specific work, raw speed work. So you might want to consider obviously switching out the double threshold stuff if that's not for you, and putting those in as well. And of course creating longer cycles. What I've learned more so than anything is these short blocks of 8 to 10 weeks is just not enough time to make any sort of serious dent into your 5k and 10k times. A quick story, I suppose. Corey has been training since January, and if you saw him on my recent training video, he came in to the year with a high 15 PB, and he's managed to get himself down to a 15.28, but this has been over a period of 7 or 8 months. So he's taken a long time to do different training blocks along the way and got there, and in that time he hasn't done any marathon training. He hasn't chopped and changed. He did Valencia last year, he's doing Valencia this year, kept it to 1 marathon a year, and spent the rest of the time working on his top end speed. And I think that was just a bit of a prompt for me to go, do you know what, maybe you should miss a spring marathon next year and really consider working on some longer micro cycles within a bigger macro cycle to really dial in and focus. So there we go, those are my thoughts on the recent 5k success I've had. A shame the 10k didn't quite go to plan, but there's plenty of time for that, and I do feel, as I just mentioned, that a longer cycle of training is going to massively help. And of course the cooler weather's coming over the winter, so maybe we can get some good times down there. But overall, really excited to get stuck in to this sort of training once the marathon season is over, and really start to work hard moving forward. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What are your favourite training sessions when you're doing 5k work? Of course, I've stated a few obvious things like longer training cycles are going to help, and potentially double threshold is not a type of training method that a lot of you would choose. Some of it is, some of it isn't. Of course, as I said earlier, it's all different and everyone likes to do things differently. It's just a type of training that I love, and I feel like I can get the most out of myself doing it. But otherwise, I've just really enjoyed myself over those last 10 weeks, and I can't wait to do it all over again. That's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving it a like, share it with your friends, and of course subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and I'll see you on the next one. Yes. Well, mate, PB. Yeah, massive. 16:08.